Hey everyone, Kristen here. We'd like to ask a huge favor, and that is to run on over to YouTube, subscribe to the Our Path YouTube channel, listen, like, and comment. We're hoping to release most of the back catalog of the Our Voices podcasts on our YouTube channel over the next few months. There will be some fan favorites, some oldies but goodies, some controversial episodes, and some feel good ones thrown in. So, if you've missed a few episodes over the course of 7 seasons, we'll hope you'll keep checking back on the YouTube channel and catch up there. By subscribing and listening to Our Voices on YouTube, you help support this podcast and Our Path. And as always, we thank you for your support in any way you're able to give it. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Our Voices, the podcast for straight partners and partners of trans people by Our Path. I'm your host, Kristen Kelbley. Our guest today is Irina Miller. Irina's discovery of her husband's sexuality started from accidentally finding a social media account in a locked folder on his phone. Not thinking much of it at first, she asked him about it. He burst into tears and said, "I think I'm bisexual." He then shared the account and the rest of his private folder, the contents of which clearly indicated he was attracted to men as well as women. Irina approaches her post-disclosure marriage as a new relationship, one with someone she knows has many good qualities, but whom she is still getting to know. Welcome to the podcast, Irina. It's a pleasure to have you.
Likewise, thank you very much for having me.
Well, we're going to be talking about bisexuality for really actually the first time on this podcast, which, as you pointed out on social media, is an oversight on our part. And I think you were right to point out, like, hey, where's an episode dealing with a spouse who is genuinely bisexual? And so I want to thank you for pointing that out. And so we're here today rectifying that. And I want to say we have looked for people. It's just, and we did actually record one interview with someone who was bisexual, but unfortunately we weren't able to air that interview. So it hasn't been for lack of trying. I just want to say that.
Absolutely. It really puzzled me why there's so many good stories, but then also I understand that people tend to probably talk about painful memories and painful stories and use online medium and podcast as a way to heal and as a way to kind of tell their side of the story. So I'm really excited. I can't say my story is entirely positive, and I can't say that it's sort of finished, that we are at the end of it all. But it's been a good experience for me since. So it's about 12 months post disclosure now, and I'm really happy I stuck with it.
Great. Okay. Well, thank you. And for coming on and being willing to share your story, which is a bit different flavor than we've had recently, which have been in some intense episodes. So, why don't we dive into your story? Tell us who you are, who your husband is. I think people can hear your accent is not American, it's New Zealand, correct?
Yes, I live in New Zealand, although I was actually born in Europe, but spent probably long enough in New Zealand to sound like a Kiwi.
Gotcha. I did think I detected a little Europe in there, like maybe Scandinavia. Am I completely wrong about that?
I've heard that a lot. So people say Scandinavia, but it's actually Eastern Europe
Eastern Europe.
based
Okay.
on the name. You probably figured, yeah.
Well, thank you very much for indulging my curiosity in your background. Okay, so your story. Tell us about it.
Yeah, so my husband and I have been together for almost 10 years. We knew each other before that. We were work colleagues and really, really good friends, as you often become with people you work with. So we kind of sat very close to each other. So he was my confidant in so many different things. And I would tell him, all of the issues in my previous relationship. He was single for pretty much most of the time that we worked together, which also puzzled me. I tried setting him up with a friend of mine even, and that kind of didn't go anywhere. So yeah, it was interesting. It kind of always felt like he was looking for the one, and the one wasn't coming. We had we had kids of similar ages, so there was lots of similar topics for conversations. And then when I left the company that we were working for together, we probably felt that there was quite a big void, and that started so missing each other, and that started the relationship. Relationship progressed very quickly because we knew each other so well. It was a bit of a fairy tale, which is also a very common theme amongst, I think, all the straight spouses, whether they're this is something I hear quite a lot or read quite a lot about, that the start of the relationship and the progression of the relationship was incredibly smooth and almost fairy tale like. That certainly was, it felt like that for us. We never really spoke about sexuality, apart from maybe a couple of comments, as in like, well, everyone is a little bit bisexual. That's something he's told me maybe once or twice. And that's something I could easily buy into because I studied psychology. I was very much into Freud, according to, psychoanalysis, everyone's born bisexual. So that was something I could easily buy into. And um, it kind of sat well with me. I aligned to it. But I think my understanding of a little bit bisexual and his understanding of a little bit bisexual were quite different.
Mm-hmm. What was your understanding of a little bit
Well,
bisexual?
according to psychoanalytical kind of tradition and body of literature, every child is born bisexual or even pansexual, and then they're starting to differentiate different kind of pleasures. We start to kind of get pleasures from eating and from playing and from interacting with other people, and then it kind of becomes that erotic and sexual attraction, and usually it settles or gravitates one way or another. In fact, there's a lot of now criticism in modern psychology of psychoanalysis, because while psychoanalysis accepts that bisexuality is very common, it's almost like, well, everyone is born bisexual, it really doesn't give a lot of credit to bisexuality, sexual orientation for adults. So it's kind of this whole idea of bisexuality being a transition point, or a temporary phase. It kind of comes from psychoanalysis as well, or at least substantiated by it. So yeah, there's a bit of a
Well, I mean, I don't. This is fascinating to me, and I think we could do a whole podcast just on this alone. I mean, I have questions that I don't want to go too far down the rabbit hole. I don't know how you measure bisexuality or pansexuality in a 2-year-old. So that seems
it's
a little
not.
questionable. Yeah,
No, it's not measurable. It's sort of like when Freud came with it. Freud actually had lots of genius ideas, but not a lot of research to substantiate it, right? Like it actually was not. It's just a descriptive kind of thing.
sure. Yeah,
So
I'm a fan of Carl Jung, so I understand.
yeah.
Yeah.
So anyway, yeah. Sorry.
Well, so we won't go down that rabbit hole, but we'll go back and we'll pivot to so your husband. When he said everyone's a little bit bisexual, obviously he had something different in mind.
Yeah, so it was kind of a disclosure, but it really wasn't. So I never really thought much about it. Look, I knew he was into bodybuilding, and he kind of had this general admiration or general interest in kind of bodies in general, and male bodies as well, because he would, just work out, and um, so that all kind of seemed quite natural. That didn't really seem anything as in, yeah, well, that's just who he is. And I think that's where it stays. So it's not entirely like you could say that he completely hid this part of him from me, but it certainly wasn't discussed or explored in a way that I would have expected before going into such, before um, committing to someone. And also, he knew how much honesty and disclosure, how important it was for me, because he knew me before, and he knew some of the struggles I had in my previous relationship with this particular thing, because my previous partner did fail to disclose quite a few things. He was entirely straight.
But just other
but
things that he didn't disclose.
oh yeah. There were
Mhm.
quite much bigger problems, I think, in our relationship. Basically, there were infidelity. There was infidelity. And yeah, so I think when this came out, and it came out absolutely out of the blue. It was sort of Christmas break, and I literally just picked up his phone to look at the time, and a folder wasn't closed, and I knew he had a kind of locked folder, but I thought it's just for keeping passwords from different things. Um, and I saw that there was a social media account in that folder, and I was like, well, that's odd. He never had a social media account, and it's fine if he does, but why would it be in a locked folder? And I asked him about it, and yeah, that's when kind of the full disclosure started. I have a feeling that he wanted to be asked. He wanted me to discover, because it kind of came as an avalanche in that moment when I asked. Looking back, I'm really grateful to him to behaving that way and not trying to minimize it or downplay it or say, oh, yeah, well, I just wanted a social media account and just didn't want the kids to see, because I would have absolutely not even thought twice about it. I would be like, oh, yeah, cool, that's fine, have it.
Yeah. Well, that's like, that is the moment for many straight pals is where the gaslighting starts, the minimizing, the dismissing, the, well, it's
Yeah,
nothing, that sort of thing. Yeah. So, I mean,
yeah.
props to him for not doing that. Yeah.
Absolutely. Reading some of the stories, I am horrified as to what could have happened had he made different choices. And I really appreciate that he didn't. So basically, that's what he said, just from the folder. I didn't even see all the other things in that folder. I just saw that social media account. And he said, I think I'm bisexual. And he opened the folder right there, right in front of me. And I saw that there were other kind of subfolders there. And I said, kind of, well, what are those? And at this stage, he's just kind of, he didn't pass out, but it looked like he was going to pass out. He sort of said, and was apologizing and gave me the phone and said, well, you can look through all of that. Yeah, and it was quite an intense moment.
My question at the moment is, were they folders of was he interacting with men, or was it just pornography and folders on some kind of app?
Yeah, it was not all of this was like graphical pornography. There were maybe some of it, but there were just some writing, some imagery. So there was clearly things that were hinting. There's nothing sort of sinister. If that was straight, content, or entirely straight content, because it was mixed, I wouldn't even thought twice about any of that. But it's just because that same-sex attraction was just so novel and strange and weird. It shouldn't have been. I don't even know why it was weird and strange, but it was.
You mean to
um,
you,
to
it was
me,
weird
yeah,
that it
to
was
me.
weird and strange that your husband had these attractions?
Yeah,
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 yeah.
yeah. So I there was no evidence of him interacting with anyone, and he said he didn't, and I don't really have any reasons not to believe him. Um, but just yeah, just finding some of that imagery and some of the notes, some of the writing was kind of like, whoa, that is a part of you I have never seen or known existed. What the heck?
Well, so yeah, so you said it was a very intense moment, as that's not surprising at all that it would be intense. So what was your reaction in that moment to all of that?
um, I guess I was just taking things in. I had a little bit of that, maybe a bit of a shock. So I wasn't overly emotional. In fact, I was kind of trying to support him in this moment, saying, "That's okay. That's okay. That's all right. It'll be fine." Because he was really nervous and he was very emotional. He was very kind of reacting in the moment. So I think in that moment initially, I was actually, it felt like I was fine. I said, well, that's nothing. That's okay. That's not like you cheated or anything. I think it kind of started hitting me almost like a couple of hours later. I couldn't, I couldn't sleep that night. So I started thinking, started doing some searches. At that stage, he was not, so he kind of used this term bisexual, but he was really, he was like, I'm not gay. And that's also, in the moment, it didn't kind of appear to me to be a red flag, because I'm like, well, I know you're not gay. Why do you even say that? But later on, it started really messing up with my mind, because I was like, why was he so, um, why was he trying to convince me in that moment that he wasn't gay? Why would his mind even go there? Why was he so, hung up on telling me that? So that was kind of just started to doubt definitely started to grow in hours and days and weeks after that. Um, yeah, there were challenging times, because then you kind of dive into the internet, and that's not a good place to be, in in that state, because you hear and read so many things, different things, but mostly negative things, because as it turns out, that's what people put on the internet. And that was, yeah, that was challenging at that stage. Probably a couple of weeks from this first moment, I had no idea who he was, and whether he really was gay, or and what it meant for us. The most important thing is that, like, what does this whole sexuality thing mean now, looking back? And I feel like the younger generation has kind of got a better handle of it on that, because I almost feel like we have overplayed the meaning of sexuality a little bit too much. And that's definitely what was on my mind, in those first kind of weeks and months post disclosure. All we started talking, and then for weeks and months straight after that, all we spoke about was the sexuality and what it means, and how that is going to affect our lives. And he went into therapy, which was great, because he had a lot of other things that he actually lots that going into therapy was one of the best things he did, and not just for sexuality, because there's so many other things that came out of it. And he's now, well, still working on it, but I guess he's so far down the track of being in much better connected to his past and his emotional self, and his sexuality as well. Um, yeah, so it just feels like it becomes a life defining thing, and in many cases it is. Like, again, when people are hiding it in if it is really their identity, but just their secret identity and not public identity, it really can change their life, but also lives of people around them. But I guess, I don't know, in our case, I felt like we were overly focused on it initially.
Just going back a little bit with a couple of questions, because I want to talk about how you feel like you were over focused on sexuality and what that means. But one question I have is, you said that initially after disclosure, you knew he wasn't gay. And then it was after you did the deep dive on the internet that things started to get a little destabilized, and you were like, well, I don't know, is he gay? Who is this person? That kind of thing. What made you, if I understood you correctly, what made you say initially, well, I know he's not gay? Why were you confident in that initially?
Well, I, we've always had a very stable and active and kind of very good sex life. That's never been an issue. I never felt that I wasn't desired. In fact, I probably felt like I say no to him more than I should, kind of kids, and you get busy, and sort of, I work too late and get to bed late, and he's already asleep, and I should have probably gone to bed earlier. So I felt like if anything, it was me who wasn't giving him enough attention rather than the other way around. I just could not imagine that, you know, living with a someone who is gay. Like, I don't think you can fake it. I still don't. I Yeah, just that thought never crossed my mind in the almost 10 years of our life together. I never thought that.
Yeah. So then what were you reading online that made you go, "Okay, maybe he is gay, isn't
Yeah.
he?" Yeah.
Well, you start reading things, right? Oh, that's just a phase, and that's how it always happens. And people realize things in installments, and it's fluid, and sometimes it changes. And he may have not been gay, but now he's moving towards it, and all of those things. And or actually, people do fake sometimes, and people fake that much, and they go through all the lengths to fake things. So you definitely get affected by opinions, by even some of the research, by well-meaning advice. Sometimes I know people mean well; they don't want you to go through the pain that they went through, and it is very common for people to come out as
Yeah.
bisexual first and then realize they're actually not.
That's one of the I'm glad you brought that up because I think that's one of the challenges of finding people to interview on this podcast who are genuinely bisexual is because so much of what we see my ex-husband came out to his second wife as bisexual initially and then graduated to gay and I was there to confirm to her that I promise he was never bisexual. So there's just that is a common theme. So I can imagine that as you were sifting through that, that you had to have entertained those thoughts and maybe those, it sounds like that was destabilizing for a time.
Very much so. Very much so. Sometimes I even had to, in fact, for big chunks of time, I had to go, actually, I have to stop. I have to stop reading everything. I have to kind of quiet my brain down, and then I have a naturally incredibly curious personality. This is how I make sense of the world around me. And if something so important happening in my life is such a discovery and relationship, and we talk about it at home, my brain definitely gets overactive, and I start consuming vast amounts of information, which is really good. But for me personally, it was quite unsettling.
Yeah, sometimes you need to. I think that's great. Just to point out here for a moment is sometimes uh, when you're in the middle of this situation or any life upheaval, information can come at you so fast. And I think, at least for me, I also had to unplug from things for a little while so that I could listen to my own intuition and take in information and decide for myself what felt true or not to me. And so I think that's a good moment to remind everybody that it's okay to unplug from the torrent of information and well meaning advice and all of that that they may be surrounded with. Um,
Absolutely. Trust your intuition is something I would recommend everyone. Particularly as women, we aren't taught enough to trust our intuition. And I think we definitely have to, whether that is a positive feeling or a negative feeling, you have to trust your intuition.
or we're not taught how, what that even really means. Often it takes something like this to figure out what that really means. So just also circling back to your husband a little bit, um, did he know to what degree was he cognizant of his same-sex attraction before he married you? And did you ever ask him why, given what you knew, what your issues with disclosure were, did you ever ask him why he didn't disclose? And did he ever answer that question?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I ask that, probably in a much less polite um, terms. Um, and the answer is, he says, I absolutely should have, but it was probably so tucked away and compartmentalized. And he didn't want to upset me or jeopardize what we had, that he didn't. And I'm sure that is very common. It's really interesting because I definitely never noticed any gaslighting behaviors in him. But it's almost becomes a fine line between he's definitely a people pleaser. So he likes for everyone to be happy. He reads people really well. He's got very high emotional intelligence. So in his mind, well, if it doesn't cost me anything, but it makes another person happy, then that's what I'm gonna say. If it's not an outright lie, and I think that's quite dangerous. And then that's actually quite cultural, right? That's what we're taught as well, isn't like, well, if it's not hurting anyone, then that's okay. I read this article on the secret sexual basements, and I thought it was a really cool article. I think it's called like that.
Yeah, we just did it. Well, actually, it hasn't been released yet. I'm not sure timing wise between this podcast and the next one. So either it'll be the one after or the one before this one. We did an entire episode on secret sexual basements. Yeah.
Yeah, so that was um, a really good article that I read, but I also sent it to him. Um, well, kind of as in like, it was kind of mean because I was like, well, that's what you've been doing. But he reflected on it. We both kind of talked about it and reflected on it. And some of it is almost supported by our culture and our upbringing because we're not taught to talk about things like that. We're not taught or not encouraged for sure to talk about things that are sort of a little bit edgy. Um, and it's better to just, don't bother others with it. And that's where it starts. And then it grows into bigger and bigger secrets. So I think I understand where he was coming from. It still doesn't change the fact that I feel that that's a big part of information that should have been disclosed and it wasn't. Um, it's also not something you can change overnight. That's also very interesting because, yes, of course, now all the big things are out and we've discussed that and we know now what we've kind of made agreements around what we will and will not share going forward. Well, more like what we will share with each other going forward. But there's some things that are sort of harder to define. Some things are harder to predict all the little things that are going to happen in your future that you have to promise to share with your partner. In that just general personality of being people pleaser, I'm now very attuned to it and it really annoys me. So he almost now has to intentionally be blunt and almost rude with me because if I feel like he's starting to sugarcoat anything, might have absolutely nothing to do with
Right.
sexuality.
But you're
Just
gonna
in
you're gonna put it on try to get it on the table.
yeah, virtually like any other area of our life, it really triggers me now because I'm like, you're not being truly honest with me right now. So it is some work on his side to get to that point where he's actually um, comfortable enough to tell me things as they are.
I think this is such an important, for people who haven't listened to either the previous episode or the one that's coming about secret sexual basements. And just to give everybody a little bit of context, secret sexual basements are about when one person has essentially some kind of sexual secret that they're keeping, regardless of the reason, and that the secrecy itself is the premise is that the secrecy itself is actually harming the partner and does constitute a betrayal of the partner and the relationship. I don't know if that jives with the article that you read, but that's
Yeah,
my
that's
understanding.
exactly
Yeah,
it.
yeah,
That's the
exactly.
Dr. Manwala.
Dr. Omar Minwala. Yep. We just did the episode. Yep. So that gives people a little bit of context with that. So it makes sense then once you are attuned to the fact that there has been a secret kept, even if harm has not been intended, but then you become hypersensitive to anything that could be also a secret or not completely on the table, or you if you start to smell a little bit of smoke, you want to make sure that there's not a fire, right? Like you are a little bit hyper vigilant about those things.
Definitely. And I'm sure we're still quite early into our kind of post disclosure relationship. I'm sure, I'm hoping that I will it's a bit of an overcorrection on my side that will balance itself out, and I will go back to not being so sensitive to him being just polite with me. But yeah, right now that's where it is. So I'm kind of really like
Right.
really
Forcing
vigilant.
forcing
Yeah.
forcing things to be on the table is, if we all really told the truth of what we wanted, like if people pleasing wasn't a thing, we might, we don't be living, I think, more truthful lives, slightly less polite lives, maybe, but more truthful ones.
That's
Yeah.
absolutely true. And that's
Yeah.
in many ways, that's been such a silver lining in this last year is that our relationship, um, we always had a good relationship and good communication. At least that's what we thought. And kind of comparing, I guess, to some other couples we meet. But this has definitely supercharged it. So I say that if you're considering staying in the relationship, post a disclosure like this. That's like a relationship boot camp. So it's going to be really hard. And you still may or may not stay together, but you will develop yourself. You will develop certain qualities, communication and honesty and intimacy that you will either be able to enjoy in this relationship or you'll take with you into the
Right.
new one.
And a big clue, I would imagine, maybe you'll agree or disagree, but is if both partners are putting in the work, like you're saying, he's going to therapy. So that,
100%.
yeah, if you
Yes.
don't have a willing partner who's going to work through mixed orientation marriage with you, I
Don't
mean,
bother.
call it a day.
No, call it
Like,
a
go,
day.
go,
Absolutely.
go get your dirty martini and
Absolutely. This would be no.
exactly.
And
Yeah.
at this stage, honestly, it does not matter if he's bisexual, gay. At this stage, sexuality doesn't matter at all because it's all about making sure you do the work together.
So when you say, so this brings us back to when you said that you thought, at least initially, there was too much focus on his sexuality itself. What did you feel like the focus ought to have been on? If it wasn't about, okay, you're gay, you're bisexual, or this or that, the other thing, what was the core of the issue for you then?
I think it's actually the lack of disclosure. So that's really what, for me, it boils down to, and making sure that it doesn't happen again. Making sure that our new relationship, that making sure that I can trust him because that still is in the process of sort of rebuilding, and making sure that the basement is kind of, out in the open and there's nothing left in
There's
there.
nothing else. So there's no cobwebs down there hiding any skeletons.
Yeah,
That's the crux of the model, of the Dr. Manwala model of the secret sexual basement, is essentially like, it isn't what the sexual secret is, it's that there's a secret that is the problem. Yeah. So it makes sense what you're saying in this framework is like, it's not what his sexuality was, it was the non-disclosure.
yeah.
Yeah.
For me,
Yeah.
it definitely was. Um, Thinking back, it's all like hindsight is always a wonderful thing. Would have I cared if he told me straight away? I probably wouldn't have, but it's hard to tell. I also don't know. Maybe I would have taken our relationship a lot slower. Maybe would have changed how I approach our relationship, but I don't think I would have said no. I don't want to see you because you're attracted to guys. It seems unrealistic that I would have. But it doesn't really matter what I actually, this is one thing that I found really liberating. And if I'm allowed a piece of unsolicited advice, is I I stopped actually thinking about my past relationship at all. To me, it was just like it's gone. It was a lot easier for me to treat our relationship as the new relationship, with someone who I know really well, who I know has a lot of great qualities, who I know we can build a good relationship with. But it's still like, this is why people who know our story, and if they ask me how it's going, I say it's going well. It's been a year. I'm kind of still getting to know him, but so far so good.
Well, yeah, and I want to talk about how you're navigating and how you're dealing with some of the feelings that might be coming up at this stage. But I think that's one of the relationship podcasters I listen to, he often says, the old relationship you had is over. And you have a choice now whether or not to build a new relationship from here. And I think that's really meaningful. And
It was really healthy
yeah,
for me. It
yeah,
it really removed this. You need some grieving, like some grieving time. You need to be able to grieve your past relationship because you have lost. And I thought I had a perfect relationship. Again, I think it's a quite a reoccurring theme, because again, well, he is a people pleaser, so I'm sure that at any stage of our relationship, he was closely monitoring my state and making sure that I'm happy and comfortable and that everything is
it's a form of managing. I mean, people pleasing is a form of managing the other. Yeah, yeah. So yeah, yeah, and it's perfectly legit to be mad about being managed.
I, yeah, and it's again, I understand where it's coming from. It's coming from a very good place. It's coming from trying to make another person happy. But I think we had lots of conversations about it. I think he now knows that to make me happy, he sometimes needs to make me unhappy, but overall, I will be happy. So it's not it. My state of happiness is not his to manage. It's my to manage. Yes, he can manage his honesty. I'm going to have to manage my state of happiness.
That's brilliant. I love it. Okay, well, let's just migrate a little bit then to how you're navigating. I'm sure people. I'm just going to jump right in. I mean, I'm sure people often feel like, well, if he's bisexual, now I have to compete not just for the attention of my husband with other women, but I have to compete with the male attention that he might be giving to them. I mean, do you feel like you've got an
Absolutely.
okay, okay. Tell
Absolutely.
tell us about that to the extent you're
I hate
comfortable.
that. I
Yeah.
absolutely hate that because I'm 44. So, finally got to the stage where I am fully content with myself and I don't worry about younger, more attractive women because I know my worth. I know. And then suddenly the world goes, oh, okay, you got a little bit comfortable there. So, how about this for a
Right.
challenge?
Right, right, right.
So that's how I felt. I'm not gonna lie, it still triggers me. It's completely irrational because I know now. Well, he's never been impulsive or never. I don't have absolutely any reason to believe that he would act on an attraction. And again, people are attracted to all sorts of people. Like I knew before he was attracted to other women. I also knew that he was choosing me on a daily basis. And for some reason, that did not bother me a single bit. Um, for some reason, now knowing that he's also attracted to guys does bother me, even though it's completely irrational. But it just does. I have to, and I think it's a time thing. It just kind of I have to get accustomed to that. Yeah,
I mean, are you and we can are there negotiate and feel free to not answer this question, but are there negotiations happening to open things up, or are you confident in the container arrangement that you guys have for your marriage?
that's a very good question because I was in the beginning, particularly, I was like, let's just, you know, let's just do it. Like, go explore, and then at least I know you chose me. You actually chose me because he had incredibly limited experience with guys. If he basically had no experience. So to me, it was like, well, you need to do this.
You were going to give him a hall pass, yeah.
Absolutely, or even just like an open relationship for some time. I sit with it, and I read all the books. Like I read all the Polysecure and the Ethical Slut, like all of and I think there's a lot of wisdom in the books. I think people should read them, but not necessarily implement those relationship structures. I definitely think that this is a far better way to approach relationship than cheating. Like there's no comparison. um it's not for me so far. I cannot just say that this is something I want to do for forever. Like, it's just not for me. I think I'm fundamentally wired for monogamy. But I could do it for a period of time if that's important. And I thought it was important because in my mind it was like, let's just get through it. And then I know I have this security and I have this confidence that that's not just a convenience choice, that this is something you've chosen. Um, he's a different person, I guess. He's not. Both of us aren't. We can't just go and do hookups, and it's we need a connection. We need and it's really hard. Like, once you think about, well, how do you build a connection with someone else while you're still in a relationship? It gets really complicated. So if any negotiation was happening, it's actually me bringing this up rather than him. And so far, all of our negotiations are kind of ending at, it's too hard. It's too hard and we don't really need it. And he says, I don't really need it. It's enough for me that it's enough for me that I don't have to hide this. I don't really need anything else.
Got it. Yeah, we did an episode a couple of years ago on open marriages, open relationships for mixed orientation marriage, how to open ethically, and um, it is complicated. Obviously, there are people who navigate it beautifully, and you did mention two books that are out there, Polysecure and Ethical Slut, if people are interested in checking those things out. And also, it's its own thing to have to
Some
navigate.
people
Yeah.
some people even say that polyamory is an orientation. Like, it's actually, you are either polyamorous or you're not. um, yeah, it's in Polysecure. She mentions that as well. That for some people, it is actually who they are. They cannot live their lives differently. Um, that's not me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Right. Whether it's an orientation or a relationship style, it's obvious that some people can do that and other people cannot. Um, are you now, as you go forward and relate and navigate your relationship, you're a year out from disclosure. Um, have you been coming out to friends and family members as a couple, as a bi straight couple, or how's that working?
Yeah, it had. Yeah, we have. I think this is a big moment for me because we have not been too vocal about it, but we definitely have told people around us. So my kids, our kids, were the first people we told together. It was, he fast forwarded, so he sort of took some time or asked for some time. It was really, so that was probably one of the things I also stated right from the start. And oh my God, I'm sure so many people are going to criticize me for that. And I'm sorry, but it was important for me to do that. I understand that that goes against how the coming out of LGBTQ people should happen, but I was in this story as well. So, and I
Yeah,
was dying.
yeah. That,
So
yeah, yeah.
I actually told them, we have to come out if you want to stay with me. If you really want to stay with me, like 6 months. We have to start. I have to be able to talk to people about it in some time in this year, preferably in sort of 6 months time, because that secret was crushing me. Like, this whole story of being pulled into their closet when it makes it super. It's like, it was so uplifting for him because now twice as many people know about his secret, but it was incredibly soul crushing for me. I this first The first couple of months where I only told my therapist and one other friend, and that friend like lives in a different country, when I could not talk to anyone about it, and particularly when we couldn't discuss it, or on when the kids didn't know and kids clearly saw something was happening, we tried to sell them the story of like, oh, we just, had a roadblock in our relationship. We're working through it. We've got girls that are teenagers. They're so smart. They're so attuned. They knew something was happening, and not being able to give them that explanation was really challenging. And he actually saw just how much I was struggling. He said, "Actually, I think I'm ready now. I'm ready to talk to the kids." We did. It was not at all a problem for the kids. All they cared about is for us staying together. They completely just like, so like, was that it? was Is that what was bothering you? Um, yes, that made my life easier straight away, because at least people that are important to me knew. And yeah, so now I can talk about it with whoever I feel I need to talk about it. And yes, so he is also opening up. Probably when it comes up, he talks about it, but it's not a big kind of coming out party.
Right. He's not, well, I don't know, maybe he is, but is he, marching in pride parades and things like that? Or is he?
N- we haven't yet. No, we haven't yet. Yeah, I'm not sure he will, to be honest. I made him a bracelet with bisexual colors. They are far less known than the rainbow colors, so I don't know if people are even recognizing it, but he was quite proud to wear it. He felt it was quite sweet. He like wore it to work, and if people ask, he talks about it. If But I don't think he's kind of just parading it.
From your relationships with friends and family, have they been, well, before I even ask that question, I mean, setting the context, I think women who are bisexual in the culture, and people may disagree or not, seem to have more permission. And in fact, one of the pain points I think some of our men hear is if they disclose and say my wife is a lesbian, and then their dude friends go sweet, and they're like jackpot, and then the husband's like, it's not so hot if she's not into you at all. So there's that experience on the men's side and the husband's side if they're married to lesbians. But then um, men who are genuinely bisexual, I don't think have as much permission in the culture to be bisexual. So if you come out as a man who's genuinely bisexual, it's like, dude, that's gay. And
No, yeah,
yeah,
and
yeah.
nobody's given that reaction
Okay. Yeah.
um, to him.
Okay.
I can see that some of the people I spoke to probably thought that,
Hmm.
or maybe say that, or just said, are you worried that maybe? And what can you say? Well, am I worried that maybe? Not really, but like, am I worried that he might one day leave me for a man? Probably just as much as I'm worried he might leave me for a woman.
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
The possibility is always there, but I highly doubt it.
So it sounds like he's navigating, or you guys are navigating the public sphere pretty well. Um, How would you say that? Because I know you've listened to the episodes of this podcast before, and obviously we've focused a great deal on straight spouses whose partners come out as lesbian, gay, and trans. How would you say, as you've listened to those stories, your experience maybe differs so that somebody listening might go, okay, well, maybe my spouse is really bisexual? Because I mean, you obviously know the signs and markers of bisexuality in your own spouse, and maybe not necessarily every spouse. But the the trick about coming out when so many spouses who are actually gay or lesbian come out as bisexual first is it gives the straight spouse false hope oftentimes. And they get to a place where they're like, oh, well, maybe our relationship can be saved. If he's bisexual, then okay, that's fine. They can say it's not really a problem as long as he's committed to me and monogamous. We're fine, or she's committed to me and monogamous. So, and that's what makes it also even more devastating later when they do come out as gay or lesbian and no, I am not sexually attracted to you or romantically attracted to you. So, what would you say if you could pinpoint some maybe differences that people can kind of look at and go, oh, okay, like,
Okay, I think it's a twofold answer to this, because the only difference between bisexual and gay person that I can think of is that whether there is attraction to, you know, the opposite gender or not. So whether he's attracted to you and or other women. That's probably the only thing I can pin this to. But they're also in some social media circles, I have met couples that where the husband is gay, identifies as gay, but is still attracted to um, his wife. It's just this one person that they are attracted to, they've chose to, they are openly gay and identifying as gay, and sometimes monogamous, sometimes not, but they are still very attracted to. Um, so that is tricky, and this is where it and again, like I've been in a straight relationship where I did not feel attractive at all, and where we did not have consistent, sex. So this is very tricky. I think what's more important, and that's where the false hope comes in, is that it's actually not his or their sexuality that's important. It's that honesty, communication, willing to work on the relationship, understanding why they want to work in a relationship. Um, are they staying because they just don't want their life to fall apart? They don't want to come out. They don't want others to know. That's maybe not good enough reason for it. So I think it's almost like look at the other. Are you need so start with yourself, right? That's what I would do. That's what I had to do because my brain was exploding with this whole is he gay, bi, and to what percent is it percent going to be enough? So it's you're starting to kind of try to measure things that are impossible to measure. But for me, it was like, what do I need from a relationship? What are my needs in a relationship? Are they satisfied? Do I see him being honest? Um, can I ask him? Can I raise any issue that I have with him? Is he treating those issues seriously? Is he willing to help me on those? Is he willing to? So I think those things that are really important. And if you don't have it, does it matter if he's bi or gay or straight? Like it, if you don't have it, you don't have it. You don't have a relationship.
Yeah, I think what I hear you saying is, it can be an endless rabbit hole to try to solve for them or figure them out. And I certainly went down that with my ex. And it can be a never, and really it comes back to, like, we did an episode a couple years ago with Dr. Joe Court, who is famously controversial among many straight spouses, and he wrote a book called Is My Husband Gay, Straight, or Bi, right? And
I read that book. Yeah, one of the first books I read was quite interesting, very enlightening. I
yeah, I mean, some people either think he's got really great ideas, and some people think he's blowing smoke and not on the money. And regardless, I mean, I think he's got some good ideas, and then others maybe not. It doesn't really matter. But the point is that whole thing is about figuring them out. And I understand that impulse because you're like, I need to know what he is or she is so that I know where I'm going. And if I hear what you're saying is it's actually more like, what are my needs in the relationship, and are they or are they not being met?
exactly. Where
Period.
are you? Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely,
Period.
absolutely.
Is this a relationship that's fulfilling to me, or is the thing blowing up and I'm miserable?
And that's what every time when I had doubts and every time when I was questioning, that's what kept me grounded. Um, when I would ask myself, what would I actually need from the relationship? Am I getting everything I need? And he was the same. He's like, well, okay, I can tell you I'm gay. What does it change anything about our communication, about our intimacy, about our sex life, about our
For you, it sounds like it's not about the label, it's about the way the relationship works or doesn't work for you, and is there honesty on the table?
exactly, exactly. And for me, sexual intimacy is very important. So I think in it for now it is. I don't know, maybe one day it won't be, but for now it is. So I know that I probably won't be wouldn't be able to be in a relationship with a guy who cannot give it to me, regardless of their orientation, right? They could be asexual, gay, or whatever that is. For some people, maybe it's not a need. So maybe they could be okay in a relationship without that sexual intimacy if other factors are, again, if other needs are satisfied.
Yeah.
So I think that's probably.
Yeah. One of my favorite sex advice podcasters, Dan Savage. I haven't listened to him in a long time, but I mainlined his podcast after my divorce. He calls it companionate marriage, where it's just you basically you love each other, you care about each other, and maybe the sexual aspect of the relationship is just not there, and that's okay. So if that's your value system and what you want, then more power to you.
uh, Absolutely, that's
Yeah.
not me.
Yeah, it's not me. It's not me either.
It's not
Right.
me, but again, after seeing all so many different flavors of things in the last
Yeah.
year, life kind of seemed a lot simpler a year
Right.
ago. Now that I looked into that and how many types and flavors of relationships there are, and variations on the sexuality theme, I'm kind of go, well, each to their own, and all you
Yeah.
can do is just assess what's actually true for you, what do you need, and false hope is really like it, it are they meeting you where you need to be met today? And if they're not, then tell them about it. And if they still aren't willing to change, you gotta go,
Yeah. Well,
I
I think
think.
that's a really good note to sort of start to conclude on. We're close to time, so I just want to give you any opportunity if there's anything else that you feel listeners should know about the experience of having a bisexual spouse.
I don't think it's any different, really. I quite honestly, right now, after having been through all of this roller coaster, I wouldn't want it any other way, because I know that um, in many ways, maybe that empathy that he has, and that ability to relate to different people, and that maybe softness. We've got girls, and he's been such an amazing father to them, a far better parent, far more attuned parent than I could ever have been. Um, I don't know. Maybe if you remove the bisexuality part, all of that would go as well, and I would never trade that for that sort of classic, masculine macho. He's very masculine, but he presents very masculine. It's just his soul is maybe a bit softer, but I would not trade those qualities for him not being bisexual. Like, I think if that comes as a package, I would take that package any day.
Yeah. Yeah, it sounds like you're moving forward with the idea that this is a new relationship and that you're getting to know this person. And then you also know that there are positive qualities to this person that make it worth re getting to know.
Yeah, I guess the one thing that I would note is, with all the optimism, and I think I sounded quite optimistic. I think you still have to always think about yourself first, and put your own kind of oxygen mask on first. Um, Make sure that I had to go to him and say, when it all started to unfold, and then he said he wanted to really stay together. I said, well, that's great, but let's do a postnup, because I don't want to come to, in another year or two down the road, and know that I went through all this struggle with you, because it's not an easy road. And then, so yeah, I guess it's a lack of trust. I guess but for me, it gave me comfort that
Right. It's you
he's willing
caring
to.
for yourself. Yeah.
It's really, yeah, whatever you need, you can bring it up gently with them, making sure that it doesn't sound like you're, asking for a divorce or anything. But if you, and again, if you feel like you need to talk to other people, like what I had, that secret was exploding me from within. Talk to your spouse about it. Make sure you. Oh, the other thing, that's that's sort of a left field, but one thing that I see a lot, women particularly are doing, is just going through all the links around kind of sexual play, and just doing things that they would not otherwise do, and that could include bringing in other partners, or some other play that they say it felt horrible and I didn't like it, and I please never do that. Like, that is That
Yeah,
is,
yeah.
it's horrible. When I read it, my skin curls because it's like it's not going to be good for you. It's not going to be good for him.
Yeah, men too. I mean, husbands too. Have there's a sense of I'll do anything to save my marriage, including this sex act or what have you that I would never have considered before, but I'll try it. And I mean, if you're not genuinely excited to do something, do not
Oh,
do it.
absolutely. I would like, no, yes, no,
Yeah.
don't. And we've been through these things. And even, I mean, we mostly live in the space of fantasies, right? We don't really do a lot of things, but we talk a lot of things. But even some fantasies are a lot more interesting than others. And then some fantasies that are just like, no, I don't want to talk about it. This is just not fun for me to even think about it. And just be upfront. It's going to take a little while for them because yes, the dynamic is he hears that he feels judged, um, and he kind of withdraws. And I had to say, look, it wasn't a judgment. It wasn't a judgmental reaction. I'm not judging you for having this fantasy, but it's just really not doing anything for me. So you need to be we need to be able to really openly communicate that. I want you to continue to bring your, your fantasies to me, but you also need to give me space to react to them in the way that I need to react, because some of them I'll go along and I'll, play the game and I will, chat, and it's kind of fun. But then others is just like, and it might not even have to do with any acts. It might just be a power dynamic or whatever that is. Sometimes you're just like, no, that's not for me. And you really need to be really firm, I think, in this, because otherwise it's just not good for anyone.
Right. I mean, I like what you say. I mean, there's room for honesty and transparency in what we're both interested in. And then there's room for allowing the other person to say, just like a buffet, I will partake of the roast beef, but not the roast chicken. Like, like there's no judgment on the roast chicken. I'm sure it's great, but
Yep.
that's not what I'm in the mood for.
Yep.
So, yeah,
Yep.
exactly.
I'm not
So,
judging you for
yeah.
offering it to me,
Mhm.
but I just
It's
not in
not
the
what I'm
mood for
having.
it. Yeah.
Right, exactly. Well, Irina, I think this has been an illuminative and very interesting and helpful conversation, and I'm so glad that you stepped forward to come on the show, and you've been such a great guest, and this has just been a fascinating conversation, at least from my end. So thank you so much for coming along.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks to our listeners for tuning in today. Be on the lookout for the few remaining episodes we have in 2024. Don't forget to subscribe to our podcast. You can find us wherever you get yours and on YouTube. Friendly reminder that the views of the host, yours truly, are not necessarily the views of Our Path or its board of directors. I want to thank our engineer and editor, Drew, at Play Audio Agency right here in Cincinnati, Ohio. And until next time, this is your host, Kristen, reminding you, keep using your voice.